Not spectacular from the Springboks, but after last week, they'll take a win over the Wallabies. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Another decent game between these two, pretty entertaining. Didn't have as much drama as last week, but last week I think was one of the best games of rugby that you'll see for a while. And I'm sorry I missed covering it because I had work to do. I was working last weekend, so unfortunately couldn't cover it for the channel, but I'm hoping to cover most of the Rugby Championship. We're also going to have some stuff on the Women's World Cup that started last night as well. I think we'll be covering Ireland versus Japan tomorrow, but let's get into this game. So first of all, Wright gets isolated as he collected a bomb early on, sidesteps one tackle but just gets swamped, and South Africa get over the ball, win a penalty. Pollard pops that over to open the scoring from the tee, 3-0. Right then, he's got to go off. Looked like he maybe twisted something, maybe got his studs caught in the turf or something when he was trying to launch a counter-attack, and he doesn't come back on. He was replaced by Kellaway. Looks like it might be, kind of a long-term injury, so hoping that's not the case, because as always, never like to see any players getting injured. Their careers are short enough and stuff like that, really isn't good to see. Then Oxenche wins another penalty for South Africa. Pollard nails that one, 6-0. Wallabies, they win a free kick at a scrum. Nick White, thinking very quickly, kicks it in behind. Corey Toole just has the gas, gets out there, out wide left, collects it, and there's nobody there to kind of stop him going over. Converted by James O'Connor. Wallabies now lead 7-6, and that's the kind of thing you need from the Wallabies. Is that quick thinking and that ability just to take chances as well to keep themselves in the game. Voxel to heat back right away. Nick White under pressure, closest own line. Quagga Smith does really well. Initial tackle and then also turns the ball over. We then have a cross kick to Kane and Moody. And he collects it and is able to step inside the cover and over the score. Bounce really helped him there. Later on in the game, a bounce didn't help him so much the other way, but that's converted for 13-7. We then have kind of a scrappy period of play with South Africa coming out on top. They work the ball within 5 meters. Oxenche, he goes close, then inside to Quagga Smith, and he goes over between the posts, converted for 20-7. But, they had a decent lead, like 22-0 in that first, the opening test of the Rugby Championship between these two. So they wouldn't be feeling too comfortable, I'd say, at that stage. Australia then, they're finding it hard to make ground, especially in the first half, and I've seen too many players just receiving the ball standing still, and they're not getting over that gain line, even though they're using, to get the likes of Valetini and Will Skelton there carrying, but there needs to be a little bit of momentum coming onto the ball, and they don't have that. They find it a little bit in the second half, and it does help them, but when they get a penalty just before half time, they decide they're going to kick for the post because it doesn't look like they're going to get anything more. And O'Connor slots that for 20-10 at half time. Into the second half then, Australia, they strike off a scrum early doors. O'Connor with a dangerous kick in behind. Moody, he's coming across, but the bounce doesn't really favour him. He tries to control it, but kind of just knocks it. It goes loose, and then the bounce favours Jorgensen, who goes over. That's compared to 20-17. And then already you're thinking, Australia are going to do it again. But, next score is actually Pollard slots the penalty to make it 23-17. Australia then have an absolutely golden chance to hit the lead. They break through Corey Toole. He's breaking up the middle. He puts in a chip, and I don't think he got it right because he basically chipped it like to the point where the bounce actually made Pollard, the favourite to get there, rather than I think if he had gone a little bit wider, it would have favoured him. He would have been able to use his pace. So Pollard gets there to disrupt, forces a knock on, and it really should have been a try for Australia at that stage. And if they had got that, who knows what would have happened. But again, we always talk about that. You can't just say if they had got that, they would have won or whatever, because it changes the whole dynamic of the rest of the game. But Australia then, up the line from a penalty, they managed to maul it up to the line, and then Paenga and Amosa, he manages to stretch out to score on the line. O'Connor misses the conversion. It wasn't that difficult to the conversion, honestly, for a kicker of his talent, but 23 points to 22, South Africa with the slimmest lead. Callaway then, he drops a pass in his own 22, but that was basically all to do with pressure from the box coming up and putting pressure. I think the pass maybe was from O'Connor, but putting pressure on the pass and the catch there, forcing that knock on. South Africa then, really strong scrum. They actually get penalty advantage on that. They keep going though through the phases, and then Etzebeth is able to stretch out to score, converted by Pollard for 30 points to 22, and there's just a little bit of breathing space for them there. And Australia trying to kind of chip away at that. O'Connor misses a penalty, would have brought Australia back within one score. They keep pressing for another score, and Fassi goes to the bin for a deliberate knock on round about halfway. Another chance for O'Connor, and this time the kick falls just short. Then clock is running out, and with the clock in the red, Pollard goes up the line after a neck roll on De Jager, but that basically comes to nothing. Etzebeth's pass to Creel out wide, going straight into touch. Full time is 30 points to 22. Deserved win for the Springboks in that one. Certainly, obviously haven't completely erased what happened the week before, and when the whole series is done, maybe that's going to be a costly defeat for them. But you have to give Australia credit, I think, for their performances over the two games. Certainly not as dynamic this time, but I think in the first game, there were a few bounces went their way and gave them that little bit of momentum they were able to go on with. And this one, they were just not able to get enough sustained periods of momentum. They were kind of always responding to the Springboks and never really getting themselves in front the way they did in that first game. But let's have a look at the stats, and then we'll talk briefly about each of the teams as well. So pull up the stats here. So 3 tries each in that one. As I said, decent performances from the teams, and part of the difference was obviously the kicking from the tee, but I think it was just the fact that, especially early on, South Africa showed that they were willing to take on those kicks, and they were more confident in Pollard being able to get them than I think Australia were in O'Connor. And you can see the fact that O'Connor, if there was any distance on it or a bit of an angle on it, he was struggling a little bit. And I think that's why South Africa were more confident to kick for the posts rather than Australia. But yeah, even in terms of the kicks at goal, clean breaks then wasn't a free flowing game. 3 for the Springboks and 6 for Australia. Defenders beaten, 15 for the Springboks and 30 for the Wallabies. So they're actually coming out like a 5-1 both in terms of defenders beaten turned into clean breaks. Offloads then 6 each. Again, not really a game too much for offloads. A lot of the offloads were to static players as well, and they didn't really advance them too much. Turnovers conceded 17 to 15. There were some turnovers at the breakdown, but mostly they were, in terms of actually knock-ons and things like that. In terms of the turnovers, there wasn't as big a contest at that breakdown. You didn't see the likes of McWright having, a huge influence the way he did in that first game. You did see Quagga Smith doing it a couple of times for South Africa, but at the same time, for both sides. You could see the guys trying to get in there to compete, and the referee telling them to keep out. So there wasn't as much of a contest allowed, I think. Rucks won 97% for South Africa is excellent. 93 for Australia. Not up to the level really that you need to, because they needed to to have that kind of 96, 97% themselves, just to be able to have the sustained pressure on South Africa. And then mauls, 100% each. We saw, maul try from Australia as well from one of theirs. Then if we have a look at the kick pass run, so in terms of run meters, 372 for South Africa to 271 for Australia. Kicks from hand, 35 for South Africa and 28 for Australia. I thought South Africa had the better of the kicking game in the first half. Australia, when they started coming back in the second half, McDermott was on pretty early because Nick White went for an HIA, didn't come back. Sulihi also went for an HIA halftime and didn't come back on too. So Australia kind of struggling with the injuries as well. But McDermott at 9 was kind of kicking more than and actually kicking pretty well, and got a bit of front foot for Australia on that. Passes 117 to 144 and runs 97 to 100. So, it means South Africa about 3.7 meters per run, and Australia down at 2.7. You can see, that again, that go forward for Australia was that little bit more difficult. They weren't bending the line as much. They weren't committing defenders, and therefore they weren't creating the space that they like to exploit out wide because of that. And, I think that had a big effect on the outcome of the game. In terms of possession then, it was 50-50, and it was fairly close between the halves as well. It was 52-48 in terms of in favour of South Africa in the first half, and flipped in the second half 52-48 in favour of Australia. Territory then 51-49, and again kind of flipped between the teams. In the first half, Australia had the more territory, 59-41, didn't really do too much with it. And then South Africa with the territory, second half, 59-41 as well. So again, just flipping between the teams in terms of one half to the other. And it was just a case of, I think, South Africa, when they got their chances, they took them more often than Australia did. And again, I think that was the difference between them. And also, we talked about the kicking at goal, the fact that they were able to get those extra couple of points that didn't seem to be available to Australia because, they weren't confident in kicking for the posts from certain positions. I think, again, fine margins at this level. On to set piece then. Scrums won 7 from 7 for each team. We saw a lot of scrums where the front rows would go down, the referee would say, get the ball out. And there was even scrums where you could see, Australia are a decent scrummaging side. They proved that against the Lions. They said it for a long time as well. But, South Africa did have a little bit of a nudge. They weren't monstering them or anything like that. But you could see that, South Africa were confident to keep the ball in there and potentially go for penalties. But as soon as the ball got to the back, the referee was telling them to use it. So he wasn't allowing a contest at the scrum, really. And, I think South Africa got the one penalty at the scrum, the penalty advantage, where Etzebeth scored a try. But, yeah, we didn't see a huge contest at the scrums, honestly. Lineouts then, 9 from 9 for South Africa, 12 for 14 for the Wallabies. The Wallabies won their own ball, but I thought, especially when Etzebeth come on in the second half, that he did well getting up to disrupt their lineout. And even though they were claiming the lineouts, there were times where, they were catching it at the back and they didn't really have a pod set up to drive it in a maul, and they weren't coming off the top. And the lifters were kind of in the way of the quick pass to move the ball as well. So, that disruption certainly had a kind of a big effect on them as well. That, even though they did well at times in the line out in terms of just securing the ball, it wasn't clean enough really to be able to exploit it. Then, in terms of tackles, 129 for the Springboks at 81% and 114 for Australia at 88%. So decent tackling, performance from Australia. And again, we didn't really see South Africa, tearing them apart or anything like that. It was more kind of just attritional kind of play and getting their scores that way. But, if it works, right? And, we know South Africa have that ability to go wide. It didn't feel like it was there for either team, honestly, in the game. On to discipline then. So, the one yellow card, that we talked about, for deliberate knock on from Fassi, for South Africa. And there was the free kick that they conceded as well. And that was the one that actually, White put it in behind for Toole to score. And then penalties conceded 9 for South Africa, 6 for Australia. So, South Africa, 9 penalties isn't bad. And the fact that, Australia only conceded 6, I've talked about this before. Sometimes a team, like, you look at that and you think, oh, that's a decent disciplined performance. But it felt like they were missing a little bit of an edge, honestly, in the game. They didn't have enough physicality. As I said, they were people like Skelton, like taking the ball, standing still. It takes them a while to get up to speed. And it was easy for South Africa to kind of, stop them because of that. And I felt like that lack of aggression as well, and the fact that they weren't giving away as many penalties, almost you would have liked, somebody to have that little bit more aggression, even if they did give away a penalty, just to kind of fire people up a little bit more in the game. It was just kind of one of those, right? So quickly, let's have a look at some of the player stats as well. So if we look at, say, we'll start with the Wallabies. So first of all, Tom Wright, wasn't on for that long, unfortunately for him. 2 runs for 7 meters. Then Jorgensen, who's always, always dangerous for the Wallabies, even if he's having quote unquote a quiet game. Like 5 runs, 15 meters isn't spectacular, but he got a chance to score a try and he delivered. So, what can you do? 6 from 6 tackles as well from him. Suilihi, only on for the first half. I think only 1 run, it says here, for 1 meter, 3 from 4 tackles, not really having, a great impact on the game. And one thing I would say about that Wallaby midfield is both players are quality, but it's rare you actually see them working well as a unit. And, it can be kind of frustrating as a neutral because the talent is there. It's just for whatever reason in the Wallabies jersey, they don't seem to click together as a unit. Ikitau, the better of the 2 midfielders, 8 runs for 23 meters, 8 from level tackles, not brilliant defensively, but certainly more effective. And then Corey Toole, 9 runs, 48 meters. He got his try there as well, 5 from 5 tackles, decent run out from him. And then James O'Connor, 2 from 3 tackles, 9 from, 20 meters from 9 runs. But really the story for him was that kicking at goal. And that's another thing as well, is that having that option of somebody else in your team who can take the long kicks if you can't as well. They kind of missed that too. And Nick White wasn't on for that long. In the forwards, you had the likes of Nick Frost, 7 runs, 14 meters. But if we look at the likes of Will Skelton, 5 runs for 2 meters. That just tells you, how little impact he had on the game. A guy that size, he basically at least 3 of his runs, he didn't make any go forward at all. And you look at him when he's in his pomp like that, it takes 3 or 4 guys to put him down. Wasn't the case today though. 7 from 8 tackles, decent defensively. Then into the back row, you got Valentini there as well. 12 runs, 37 meters is decent. But again, if they're really on the up there, you expect that to be kind of higher from him. 8 from 8 tackles, it's decent, but again, you can't just have one guy who's making your gain line. You have to have multiple threats. Otherwise, the Springboks in defence can just double up or even triple up on players with a guy maybe going for the poach. And that's really what they did with him and Skelton. There weren't enough kind of carriers in the team. And then, the likes of McWright, two runs, 3 meters, no threat over the ball either, really. 70 tackles is decent. And Hooper, 19 meters, 7 runs, 8 from 10 tackles. Again, they're okay numbers, but nothing amazing. And then on the bench, really, Tate McDermott I thought was okay from the bench. And then Kellaway at the back, fortunately for him, had that knock on that led to the Etzebeth try. Bell and Nongor were okay when they come on, and Payenga and Mosa obviously got a try from the bench as well. On to then the Springboks. So we had Fassi, 49 meters from 8 runs, and then Kanan Moody, 1 meter, 1 run, but he got himself a try, so fair play to him. Not seeing the ball a lot often, but he delivered when he had to. Jesse Creel, 21 meters for 3 runs, but I thought Delende was better for me. 70 meters for 7 runs, but those are hard meters that he was making as well, carrying up the middle and kind of bending the line. Chesson Colby, 59 meters from 9 runs. He was decent in the air as well for such a small guy. So good in the air. Doesn't always win the ball, but he'll, slap it back on his own side or force a knock on or anything like that. He had a decent game. Andre Pollard, then, 29 meters from 8 runs, 4 from 5 tackles, but, his kicking really was the thing, 3 penalties, 3 conversions from him. To, I think O'Connor had like 1 conversion and 2 penalties. And then Grant Williams, didn't really see the threat that he carries in terms of ball in hand, but still I thought it was a decent performance from him while he was on the pitch. And then, you got the likes of Oxenchae, 24 meters from 3 runs from him. Malcolm Marks, not really having the impact that you maybe would have seen a few years ago. Just 2 meters from 5 runs from him. And then Thomas Utoy, 38 meters from 6 runs is decent from him. Orji Sneyman, just 5 meters from 3 runs. We weren't really seeing his offloading game. It wasn't that type of game again where the forwards on either side really were tying in too many defenders and are releasing that space out wide. But, someone who had a really good game was Marco van Staden, 19 meters from 8 runs. Mostart, just 8 meters from 2 runs, but still was decent. But Quagga Smith, a big standout, in an 8 because of an injury before the game, 27 meters, 6 runs, got himself a try, he got turnovers, 14 from 15 tackles, just really good. And then the bench, it wasn't really a bomb squad effort in terms of just impact, but you did have, decent impact from there. Etzebeth was good. Dieger at times, not as good as Etzebeth, but Esther Hazen I thought went okay in midfield as well. Reinark, when he come on at 9, was pretty good as well. Feinberg and Gambazuli didn't really see enough of the ball for me. I think he got 10 meters from 4 runs from him. But overall, again, it was just fine margins, and South Africa were winning those tight battles all the way, and I think very deserved win for them. In the same vein that Australia's win last week was very much deserved as well. But interesting now for the Rugby Championship, both these sides now 1 win from 2 games, and we'll see what happens now with the All Blacks and Argentina later, whether everyone's going to be on 1 win or are the All Blacks going to be out ahead at the start. But yeah, Australia's certainly shown that they can compete at this level, but today South Africa again just had that little bit of an edge. But let me know what you think down in the comments.